Okay, let's just strip away the hype and dive right into this explainer. Today, we're popping the hood on the absolute most talked about AI framework in the ecosystem right now, LangChain. If you spend, any time at all reading about AI agents, RAG pipelines, or multi-step language model workflows, you've definitely seen the name. But what actually is it? Let's find out.
We've got to start right here by acknowledging the massive elephant in the room. LangChain is incredibly polarizing. I mean, it is literally the most installed Python package in the large language model space, yet it's also hands down the most argued about framework in the AI builder community. You've probably seen the heated debates on Twitter or Reddit just as often as you see people praising it. But before we can form a solid opinion on whether it's right for your next project, we need to completely understand what it actually does, and just as importantly, what it doesn't do.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Demystifying the framework. 2. The 3 core primitives. 3. Building an agent workflow. 4. Framework versus raw SDK. And 5. Choosing your AI stack.
All right, Section 1. Demystifying the framework.
The crucial word to zero in on here is orchestration. LangChain is an orchestration framework. It's not magic, guys. When you use the raw SDKs from companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, or Google, you are generally getting a basic client. One prompt in, one response out. LangChain simply takes that basic primitive and wraps it in a set of reusable building blocks. You assemble those blocks into pipelines, and the framework gracefully handles all the messy plumbing in between. Think of it kind of like a general contractor on a construction site. It doesn't actually pour the concrete itself, but it makes absolutely sure the cement mixer arrives right before the foundation is laid. Moving on to Section 2, the 3 core primitives. So, despite LangChain having dozens and dozens of classes, almost everything you're ever going to build relies on just 3 fundamental building blocks. The first one is models. These are basically provider-agnostic wrappers around chat LLMs. By using a function called initChatModel, LangChain gives you this perfectly unified interface. That means, under the hood, the calling convention works exactly the same whether you're hitting Claude, GPT-4, Gemini, or Mistral. You can literally switch from Google's Gemini to Anthropic's Claude by changing just one single string in your code. How crazy is that? Next up, we have tools. Tools are just standard, everyday Python functions that the LLM is allowed to call during a run. The real game changer here is the @tool decorator. You just slap this simple decorator onto your plain Python function, and LangChain automatically reads your doc strings to know when the model should use it. Plus, it reads your type hints to build out the JSON input schema, so the model knows exactly how to format its arguments. You don't have to write any nested JSON schemas by hand, and let's be real, that is a massive relief. And finally, our third primitive, agents and graphs. These are the orchestrators. They run the language model in a continuous loop, intelligently route those tool calls we just talked about, accumulate the state of your conversation, and ultimately decide when the task is actually finished. So instead of you having to hack together a manual wild true loop with explicit termination logic, a helper like create agent packages the whole shebang into a neat state machine. It essentially remembers what just happened so it knows exactly what to do next.
Section 3. Building an agent workflow.
Let's see how these components seamlessly interact in a standard Python workflow. By combining our 3 primitives, assembling a working agent takes just 4 logical steps. Step 1. Initialize the chat model. Let's say we're using Google's Gemini Flashlight since it has a great free tier. Step 2. Define a tool function, like a simple fake weather tool, using our @tool decorator. Step 3. Create the agent graph by binding the model to our list of tools. And step 4. Just invoke the agent with a user's question. 15. That is the exact number of lines of Python code it takes to build that entire working agent we just described. 15 lines. You've got 3 imports, 1 fake weather function, 1 model call, 1 agent, 1 question, and boom, 1 perfectly formatted answer. The LLM decides to call the tool, the framework executes it, hands the result back, and the LLM phrases the final answer. That right there is the so-called magic of LangChain in action. Section 4, Framework versus Raw SDK. But to really evaluate what's happening here, we have to pull back the curtain. If we take that exact same agent, the same weather tool, the same question, the same Gemini Flashlight model, and write it directly against Google's raw Gemini SDK without using LangChain at all, the code length dramatically doubles to about 30 lines. And those extra 15 lines absolutely prove that LangChain isn't doing anything magical. That doubling in code size happens purely because the framework is absorbing 4 very specific, tedious developer chores. First, the tool schema. Without LangChain, you're stuck writing out complex JSON dictionaries for function declarations yourself. Second, the loop. Without the framework, you're writing a manual while loop to constantly check for tool calls and execute them. Third, the state machine. You have to track message history and append function responses in the exact, strict order the provider demands. And fourth, provider portability. Let's look a little closer at that last chore, because the tax of provider portability is massive. If you want to switch your working agent from Gemini to Claude using LangChain, like we saw, you change exactly one string. But if you try switching providers using the raw SDK, you're looking at roughly an 80% code rewrite. You've got different client classes, different message formats, completely different tool use schemas. What LangChain is really selling you is the luxury of not having to do that rewrite.
Section 5. Choosing your AI stack. So, the million-dollar question, when is it actually right to use this 50-megabyte framework, and when should you just build from scratch? Let's check out this decision matrix. If you anticipate switching providers, or you want to use pre-built RAG components, or you're shipping multiple agents and need them to have a consistent shape, LangChain is highly recommended. But look at those bottom rows. If you are totally committed to a single provider and want zero extra dependencies, or if you have highly custom, unusual flows where you need maximum long-term maintainability, the raw SDK is actually your best bet. Honestly, sometimes writing a 30-line loop yourself is way cleaner and more maintainable than learning a massive framework's specific quirks.
Ultimately, neither approach is universally better than the other. Both will produce the exact same final answer for your user. It really comes down to your team's timeline and goals. The framework version is going to save you weeks of work on standard pre-built patterns, but the raw SDK gives you absolute control, zero dependencies, and it completely exposes the underlying details. That exposure is incredibly useful when you're first learning how these systems actually tick, but man, it quickly becomes a tedious task when you're just trying to ship features to production.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on. Now that we know LangChain is simply an orchestration tool wrapping standard API calls, take a hard look at your own projects. Are you choosing your tools deliberately? Is your current default tech stack hiding underlying complexity that you actually need to understand to build a better product? Or on the flip side, are you importing a massive 50-megabyte framework to solve routing and portability problems that your specific project literally doesn't even have? Challenge how you choose your tools moving forward. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep building deliberately.
If you found this helpful, hit subscribe and the bell so you never miss a video.